Podstock.
Hello, everybody, and it is the day. You are listening to this on the day. If you are listening to this the day I launch it, which is the 20th of July, 2023, a day that will go down in infamy for Washington fans. It's VD Day, folks. It is VD Day, VD Day.
You had to throw that in there, didn't you?
Victory over Dan Snyder. Yes. I guess it should
well.
be VDS Day.
Is that a particular type of VD that you're referring to?
No, but the S could also stand for STD, and then it's just a double, acronym.
I thought maybe you were referencing VD-syphilis or something.
Yeah, it could be syphilis. Let's say Dan Snyder's syphilis.
Does it make a difference?
No, it really doesn't.
I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
Pick your social disease, and that's Dan Snyder. Look, what we're talking about here is the day that you're listening to this, at least the day that it's released,
right,
is the big day of the NFL's vote to accept the Harris bid to buy the Washington team from little Danny Snyder.
Correct.
So this is a big day. This goes all the way back to, 99 is when he bought the team, I believe?
Yep. Yes. He bought the team in 1999.
And who knew? It was kind of obvious from, day one he probably wasn't going to be a freaking owner, I think. Because from day one he was interfering with the roster and making a bunch of dumb signings and let's make a big splash and bring Bruce Smith in and Deion Sanders and all of this stuff.
Walking into the boardroom and telling everyone I'm firing all of you.
Yeah, that's what insecure tyrants do.
Yes.
So it was obvious, I think, from day one that he was probably not going to be a good owner. But I don't think I ever imagined, nor anybody did at that time, the depths of despair.
Right.
That this man has taken this franchise. And so it's truly a momentous day. We need to rejoice from the mountaintops.
Mm-hmm.
We probably ought to play Hail to the Redskins here one last time in memory.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, we're going to do it. If Alex can remember.
100%.
Hey, I'm not drinking on the work days anymore, so I'll remember.
Okay, so insert it right here. Okay, great. That was Hail to the Redskins.
Yeah.
One last time because this man ruined it. But I just like to congratulate everybody for physically surviving, mentally surviving the past 24 years.
Right.
Because it's truly been off its ruined fandoms for many people, including me.
Mm-hmm.
And so to this man, quote unquote, this tiny tyrant, as I use the term in my column today.
Right.
I wish him nothing but the worst of luck. Go sit on your millions or billions somewhere else and never ever surface again.
Yes.
That's
the choose your STD guy is, and the nice thing about, I take small victories where we can. He's not getting $6 billion because he owes $2 billion to other people right now, which is a nice little part of this.
He's still getting multiple billions.
Yeah, I know.
Undeserved.
Yeah, that part does stink. And I'm sure he's putting in a nice tax haven, somewhere in the Bahamas or something like that.
Probably. It's in a trust.
Yeah.
God knows what. You know. And he's got, anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, he's about to be gone, barring any last-minute snags, which I certainly don't think is going to happen. He will be gone. And hopefully this will be the last time we ever mention his name on this show will be today.
Oh, no. We'll mention it when he dies,
If we're still doing this show when he dies, I mean, how old are we going to be when he dies?
He's literally almost 7 years away from me. I mean,
he lives on a boat, though. Yeah. Strange things happen when you live on a boat.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I mean, you saw
Sharks.
Wolf of Wall Street,
Harpoon incidents.
And I will say, though, is his hindsight really is 2020 because you say from day one when he walked in the office and he started making these decisions, but you're not wrong, 100% correct in that. We saw the disaster coming. But his very first interview on the day that he bought the team, when you listen to that interview again, the one question that really stood out, where it's like, there was your aha moment on what to potentially expect when he was asked. So who, I'm going to paraphrase it, basically asking who he's going to put in place to run football operations. Is he looking at a few guys basically, and he's just, I haven't decided that yet. I haven't decided what I want to do yet. I'm like, that right there. I mean, it seems so innocent then. Now it's just like, now you know what he meant. I'm making all the decisions. The decisions are going to run through me, and that's how it's all going to end up being. It's like, I mean, I lost many, many hair follicles over the years because of him.
Well, you know what?
But
Fundamentally, the real problem with the guy is that he's a combination of extreme narcissist, a lack of serious intellect, and a bad manager. He's got all three of those things going for him, and you could survive like one of them. There's people who've been narcissistic in charge and not been terrible, but you can't have all that stuff. He's just a combination of terrible. There's a reason he's ruined every business he's ever touched, including this team. And I don't think anybody can take credit for really knowing how bad it was going to get with this guy, but I think it was obvious from the start that it was going to be
issues.
Bad. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, people knew when they happened because people were there, but it was not like public. I think you could have the first couple of years been like, look, he's playing fantasy football. We all know that, but he is spending a lot of money to try and get players and all. Like, you could have looked at that and seen some hope in that. This is how he wants to run the team. It was never going to work, especially when he's making terrible decisions at quarterback, right and left. Like,
that was the moment that I really knew it was going to go south. Was when he replaced Brad Johnson and brought Jeff George in.
Yeah.
That was the moment I knew it was all going to fall apart.
Well, see, and me, I kept my fandom blinders on, admittedly so, and I would just tell anybody that I worked with, I said, listen, the guy he wants to win, he wants to spend money, he wants to do, just wait until he gets that GM that he will listen to. I would say that for years, and finally I got to the point where you said, you know what, this guy ain't gonna listen to nobody, and it was a brutal downfall ever since.
Well, do you remember when they hired Rivera and he's like, I need to go with a coach-centric approach again because that's what I think works. It doesn't work. But it's the only thing that kind of works for Dan Snyder because he was afraid of, older coaches because he is a little weenie man who's afraid of older men who are man's men, like Mike Shanahan, like Joe Gibbs, like Ron Rivera. These are guys who they're seasoned leaders, and Dan Snyder fears that. So he listened to those guys. But, any general manager, look what he did with Scott McCloughan. He might not have been a perfect general manager, but they ran him out of town and they dragged him through the dirt afterwards.
Well, that's a history. They drag everybody through the dirt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and they've done it to other coaches. They've done it to plenty of players.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's his MO. I get that.
I mean, at the heart of it, like Scott McCloughan was a dumb choice, okay? He was not terrible, but the man was an alcoholic,
Oh, he had flaws.
Yeah, I mean... But
what else are you going to do to get somebody here,
Yeah, I mean, by that time, it was kind of too late. I mean, the ship had sailed long before, he hired McCloughan, for sure. But if there have been other horrible owners in football, in NFL, in other sports, who've at least not been a total train wreck because they will somehow manage to get the right people in charge. That has happened. I'm not saying they're going to win championships, but it didn't have to be as bad as
look at the Arizona Cardinals. Train wreck ownership. But they get there every once in a while. They haven't won one, but they've been to the Super Bowl more recently than Washington.
Well, right.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, you can fall into it every once in a while, but Dan Snyder just was utterly incapable. Just think about how far things fell under his leadership. In the 90s, Washington was in the midst of the longest streak of sellouts in American professional sports.
Right.
3 Super Bowls, classic franchise, one of the most popular in the league.
One of the most popular in the world.
Yeah. And
especially London, yes.
And fast forward 24 years later, they have the smallest fan base in the country. They in the NFL rather. They haven't sniffed a Super Bowl in the
No.
entire time. They've barely sniffed the playoffs in the entire time, and they're a laughing stock. I struggle to think of another franchise that has gone so wrong so fast.
I mean,
And see, and when
fast
you
being a
think it,
relative term, but yes.
yeah, because when you think of franchises like the Cleveland Browns and the Jets, for years and in some cases even decades, you have these organizations that they always seem like they're snake bitten. They can't, even when something seems like going right, something happens, an injury or whatever it is, and
Yeah.
they're set back. But it was never really ever because ownership just completely decimated the organization. I'm not saying ownership may not have been great, but it was never always because the ownership made those decisions to get to that point. They just made the wrong football decisions to bring in the wrong guys to do whatever jobs they asked him to do. Snyder, he just steered that ship in that direction. Snyder is the one that made the decisions to get this team where they are, whether you look at the football side, business side, and even just for people in between those four walls that worked under him. Everything was all just about how inept he is, his narcissism, and everything you mentioned before, Steve, is absolutely 100% correct. And what you guys had talked about before in the past, even when I came on the pod, you guys talked about it. Even before, again, is the fact you couple everything you said about him, Steve, and the fact that he has nothing else to spend his time on that you guys talked about before. He has nothing else to distract him, and he's in the building with that makeup you just mentioned. And that is a recipe for a complete disaster. You guys have talked about that so many
Yeah,
times.
and he did claim in the congressional hearings that he wasn't in the office that much.
Right.
And
And
maybe
that's
that
been
was
contradicted by many people.
yeah.
Yes.
But the larger picture is he didn't have anything else to do. Maybe he wasn't there every day, but it's not because he had other businesses. I mean, the NFL team I worked for, I saw that owner like once or twice, and that was it. He
Right.
was never there, and he had a whole empire of other things that he was doing, businesses to run, all this stuff. And Danny just doesn't have any of that.
Yeah.
He tried, but it all fell apart. You
Yeah.
know.
And it's going to be interesting now with Harris coming in because he does have other things, another empire, but his entire empire seems to be sports, which
Yeah.
is a, a new thing for us. I mean, Jack Kent Cooke was kind of this guy in that way. Jack Kent Cooke made a lot of his money in television and radio, but he bought like his first big thing was he bought a minor league baseball team in Canada, I believe it was. Then he parlayed that eventually into getting the L.A. Lakers, right? And what did he get the Kings to at that time, or was that later? I can't
I
remember.
no, I think that was later.
Okay, but he eventually he owned these teams in L.A. Then flips that to get the Redskins. Like this, Harris hasn't sold his teams obviously, but he's a similar sports owner guy. Like this is what he does, and I'm not saying that means Harris is going to be successful like Jack and Cook. I don't think I would be ecstatic if that happens, but that's very hard to do. To ever win one championship is difficult. Three is amazing.
Well, the point is, the bigger picture point is that
Right.
Harris is at least a pro who's
Right.
got
He's
a
a pros pro.
team and he's got an organization behind him. He's
Right.
not some jackass who ran a telemarketing scam, who
Right.
bought into a team with nothing and nobody around him, which is what Snyder did. And by the
Yes.
way, I mean, was this off the air? It was off the air. Like Alex, I think you mentioned Howard Milstein. We were talking about kind of planning the show and whatnot.
Yeah.
Howard Milstein was the guy who originally bid on the Redskins after Cook died. And by the way, we can all blame this on Jack Kent Cooke in some sense, because the reason why all of this happened in the first place is that Jack Kent Cooke's estate ordered the team liquidated with the proceeds going towards the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, which, by the way, still exists today and is a good charity. That provides scholarships
Absolutely
to college
fantastic. I saw something. I saw their list of award winners like a few months ago for the
Yeah,
next
so I'm not disparaging that, but the
Yeah.
reason he did it that way caused his son to not be able to take control of the team. And
Right.
that's when Howard Milstein stepped in. And Milstein, believe it or not, is a bigger butthead than Snyder somehow, if that's possible. And the owners said, no, we're not going to, they told him, you're not going to be successful in this. And he went away and Snyder swooped in. That's what happened
Well, and I
25
heard
years ago.
today it wasn't just Milstein. Fred Smith tried to be the majority owner before Snyder and couldn't get the money together.
I
And
hadn't
then,
heard that part.
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't hear that either. No.
Yeah, so Snyder was kind of like their third choice that time, which is just fascinating. Now, I don't know if Harris is the league's first choice either this time.
Oh, clearly not. I mean,
Yeah.
it's more with him though. It's not him. It's
Right.
the financing is weak. That's
Sure.
the problem.
Sure, the financing is going to be a nightmare for this team, and that's going to impact the team on the field a little bit.
It's very heavily leveraged. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah. So I think we're all excited, right? Everyone's going to be excited for Harris. We're all going to want to give him and Magic Johnson and Rails and these guys a shot. It sounds like they're going to do the anti-Snyder thing at this first season. They're not going to try and shake things up this first year. They're going to get the lay of the land for a season and then make their moves.
Well, I think at this point, Dave, you need to reiterate, because Dave lives in the city of hate, Philadelphia, and has seen this process happen with
Right.
the 76ers.
They like
and
to call
New
it the
Jersey.
process. I call it just generally good management.
Yeah, like not overreacting, maybe.
Right.
Well, it's you have to be careful in calling it.
But
good
the
management
reason
at the
why,
same
before
time.
you get
I get
started,
that.
the reason why we use the term the process has been Standing wrote a column. It's in the Athletic.
Oh, that's what we called it. That's exactly what it was called.
Yeah,
It was called
but go ahead.
People like to call it the process. Kirk Cousins also called what he did the process. I think there's like a bland generic white dudes love saying everything's the process.
Well, with Kirk, it was like,
mediocre
okay, the team
process.
lost. How do you
Yeah.
feel? Well, I felt okay because I followed my process, so it didn't really
Right,
matter.
exactly.
That just rubbed me wrong.
Process oriented. I got tired of that phrase. Yes,
oh yeah.
but
I
as
feel like
far-
that's like one of those 7 habits thing that certain people love,
Yeah. But as far as up here in Philadelphia with the Sixers, there's some misconceptions that people talk about. They really try hard to talk and try to understand how it all worked up here.
Yeah.
I even had a little bit of an exchange on Twitter with somebody the other day about it. Now, when he came in, it wasn't something he did right away with Sam Hanke. I think his second year in his ownership is when he brought in Hanke, because Hanke sold him on this process, on what he wanted to have done, and he bought into it. He supported him and went through the whole process again with him on that. And the actual events to get to where they wanted to get to with the draft picks and all the draft capital and and taking on the teams' expiring contracts so they can unload all the salary and how the typical NBA works and all that. All that was going just pretty much as planned, and the league hated it. The league couldn't stand the fact that they were doing this process, tanking for the best lottery position and so forth. Now, as far as all that working, that was great. It got exactly what it now. Here's where the bad management aspect came, and you got to give liability to Harris on this too, is that when the selections were made under Hanke, I think in terms of analytics, I think that's where it went too far, because they took Ben Simmons, and he was just more, well, he's a young LeBron, next LeBron. And that wound up being a bust of a pick. I can't remember who else was in that draft after him. But then the following year after that, they moved up in the draft from 3 to 2 with Boston, so they could take Markelle Fultz, because the analytics said he was a much better player than I believe it was Tatum, is what Boston had taken in that draft. I believe, I can't recall exactly, but whoever Boston took wound up becoming a much better player, which is a player that the Sixers fans are screaming for to take him. But they took Markelle Fultz, who seemed like a natural shooter, but then he came into the D League. It was like he all of a sudden forgot how to shoot, and then he tried to get everything. It just, I can go in that detail with that on another show. I won't. Yeah. But the whole point is that the picks that they made outside of Joel Embiid all end up being flops, And then the biggest controversy or the big knock on Harris was that after Hankey was fired, the league forced him to bring on Colangelo, and then after Colangelo handed over to his son, and that whole process right there, Colangelo was not the GM that the league thought that he was, and he wasn't very good, and the team
Mhm.
was stagnant for a couple years, and then Brand came in, and then Harris put together a front office that got the team where they're at now. Now, yeah, you could fault Harris with the whole management
Can
deal.
I
I part of
opine
it.
at this point?
What's
It
that?
sounds like if I could opine, it sounds like this isn't much of a process than just a bunch of bad decisions by
There were a
Harris.
lot. There were a lot of bad decisions collectively.
Because a
You know,
process would be, I'm bringing a guy in day one or day 10 or something, and we're going to have a strategy wherein we're going to rebuild from the ground up.
well, the
That's not.
strategy, the strategy itself worked because you got all the draft capital, you got the draft you needed to get the players you needed. But unfortunately, the guy who engineered all that draft capital was not the right guy to make those picks. In
Right.
actuality, and this is where Harris is at fault with this, Harris should have had that foresight to go, well, I like your process, but I'm not really sold on you making these picks.
See right
And
here.
that's it. And that's a decision right there Harris has to deal with. But when you look at what he did with the Devils, and he went that route, he made sure that whoever he had in place was a guy not only had the vision but could execute it. And
See, I'm
now the
not
Devils,
sure that in this case that would it almost would be more effective in my view to just burn everything to the ground. I mean, I'm not saying in like be rude about it like Snyder was, but kind of with this team in particular, which is so broken, the fans are so broken, everything is broken. Sometimes you just have to admit defeat and just start over. And
Well,
it might be
so
better for everybody if you just fire everybody, not the secretaries and et cetera, but the people in charge, get rid of all of them.
honestly,
so
I
the
think he will
interesting
after this
thing
year.
I think the interesting thing with this process, and when you look at those other teams, uh, in those other teams, the core infrastructure wasn't rotted. The 76ers have a very loyal fan base. The New
Yes.
Jersey Devils have a very loyal fan base. Neither was in an urgent need of a stadium. I know the 76ers are trying to get one. They could play it where they're at for another 10 years. It's fine.
Right.
It's not a must do. It's a wanna do
No.
for them.
Right.
He's coming into a team now with no identity and a lot of run. And so, like, the process here is going to have to be very different in that regard. You're right, Steve.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the overall overarching thing is, what does this guy do when he gets a team? He wants to build through the draft. He tries to build a core base, and then he adds to it in free agency because that's what he did in New Jersey.
Yes.
That's what he's doing in
Yeah, but
Philly.
And
Like
I
that.
think,
That's his process that I understand.
and just to add, I think he truly did learn after the whole process and Hankey experience because the GMs he went after at that point were guys that not only had the vision, but the vision that he knew or was confident enough to know that he could execute, which is what you saw in the later part of the Sixers era right now, where they're contenders now, and
Right.
you see the Devils building where they are. So you can see that he's learned from his mistakes. And that's something I think gets overlooked with Josh Harris. I'm not saying he makes masterful decisions, but he adapts. He seems to, because even the first Devils GM he brought in, he was only there for about 2.5 years, and he just saw right there is like your vision's not working.
yeah,
We're
but
not
look,
getting where we need to be, and he
you
moved on. And now look at him.
you can build an NBA franchise in free agency though.
Sure,
Oh yeah,
The
yeah, I
Lakers
get
have
it
that.
done
is
it for
totally
years.
different from
The
the other
Lakers have done it for years. There's teams that have done it for years. You cannot do that in the NFL,
No, right.
really. You have to do it through the draft, and so I mean I don't see it this strategy as being anything spectacular.
No, it's not.
No, I
He's
don't think
not
you will anything
reinventing the wheel.
spectacular. No.
But I'll take like professionalism and normalcy for 100, Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean that all by itself would be. Look how comparatively bland our offseason has been this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
In years past, we've had just crisis after crisis to talk about every single week, and it's been
Yeah.
like months of nothing, and that's maybe bad for radio, but it's or fake radio, whatever we're doing here. But it's good for the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
you're
just
exactly. That's
I
very
just
true.
think I just think he's going to take what he's learned in the other two teams. He's going to apply it the way exactly how you're talking, Steve. He's going to realize he can't do what he did in the NBA. That's why later on with the Sixers, he started bringing in those free agents to help the team as opposed to just drafting. He can't he can't develop like you do in the NHL because the NHL takes years with players in the AHL and so forth
Yeah.
playing over in Russia. That's a process all within itself right there. You can't do any of that. And you're absolutely right, Steve. The point that I'm making is that when he's going to come in here, he's going to understand, he's going to see how an NFL team has to be built and how it needs to get where it has to get to. And it has to be done through the draft and the most important position on the field, quarterback. And if Sam Howell doesn't get, if Sam Howell not like 65% completion, like you were mentioning in your article, and throwing for over 30 touchdowns and so forth. I'm telling you, he's not. He's going to want to bring a GM in and say, find me, build this roster and find me a quarterback.
Could you just go backwards in that first, the way you started the thing, where you said I'm right? Just repeat that.
I've said you're right before. What are you talking about?
I just have to. It stroked my ego to have it. Yeah.
Look, I think we always talk about how building in the NFL through the draft, the draft's a crapshoot. It's even more so in the NBA. Let's be honest. So, like, building through the draft in the NBA is also very tricky. You never know how these players are going to come. Unless it's LeBron James, who everyone kind of figured would be a star, and let's be honest, the league set him up that way. You never know.
But there's been number one draft picks who've busted, and in the NBA, all kinds of things.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think, I guess what all this is leading to, in my view, what I think we're going to see from this Harris character for a year is kind of a trial period.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And it's also way too late to really mess anything up change anything too terribly for 2023. You're not going to change a coach right now. Even if you wanted to burn the roster down, you couldn't. It's late in the offseason to replace. I mean, I guess he could maybe do the GM, but Ron Rivera's a GM, and so he can't really do that at all. So Jason Wright could go. You will see. But I would venture a guess, just based on what we talked about, that I think he's probably going to leave most things alone for the time being.
They've kind of stated Wright's going to be there for a year.
Yeah, just for this year.
Yeah.
I think Jason Wright's not a good team president. I think he would be first one to be frog marched out the building if it was up to me.
Well, yeah, but it's a timing thing.
But you can't do it. You could, but I mean, it's not. I don't know if it'd be particularly productive.
I believe it was Alex that mentioned this before. That I think they're just kind of giving Jason Wright a stage to sit there and go, well, after this year, you're going to say you're going to move on and do other things or accept another job or something like that, as opposed to just firing him. I think you were talking about that.
I think they're trying to let him out with dignity kind of situation is my guess. But the things they should be considering doing, and I think we've already seen some of this. We know where Washington's front office and scouting department lacks. It's one of the smaller scouting departments. They have had the smallest analytics department in the league for years. And there was some talk that they're adding some people there already. That's what he could do right away this year to start making his presence felt. Beef up that analytics department. Beef up that scouting department. Scouting departments, they range from like 5 guys to like 30-something guys. And, maybe when Cleveland did that, that was absurd. But I'm all for, you should have, honestly, if I were Josh Harris, or if I were advising him, what I would tell him is the NFL's been scouting this one way forever where it's mostly regional based. You should literally just hire a guy and say, go find a quarterback. Like, that's your job as a scout. Just find quarterback. Because that's the most important thing.
They don't really do it like that. NFL teams aren't organized like that. It's mainly regional. They're regional scouts.
They're obsessed with regionalism, and finding a quarterback is the most important thing you can do. There should be a guy whose job is just to do that.
I mean, it would be an option. It's one way to go. Yeah. But, I mean, that's a very minor point in the grand scheme of things.
Sure.
The organization of the scouting department. Um, what he's got to figure out first is who's going to be the team president.
Right.
What does he want this team president to do?
He's got to get his ID and his key card. That too.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. Um, he's got to figure out whether Ron Rivera is the guy going forward. I suspect he's probably not.
Mm.
I suspect he's
I'm
probably
sorry,
going
there's
to be
no
gone.
way.
Yeah.
He can make
And
a
so
deep playoff run. No way.
Yeah, and so then the question is, do you just get rid of the whole coaching staff? Do you promote Jack Del Rio? Do you promote Eric Bieniemy? Or you do what Alex has suggested for years, which is hire a general manager, let the general manager pick the coach, which is,
Right.
God help us, would be normal. So all that stuff, I just don't think it's going to come immediately. I think this is maybe
I think
an
that's
end
always,
of 2023 thing.
it's going to take a year. And by the way, he's going to need probably that time to talk around the NFL, figure out who these up and coming GMs are, because he might have some idea, but
There's one
he'll
sitting in
talk
Philadelphia he knows very well, Hannity.
Right.
He works underneath Howie Roseman up here. That's the
You've
guy
mentioned
you
him
need
before.
to bring.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
have
you've mentioned him before.
But
I'd
yeah.
hate to admit that anything from Philadelphia is good, so that would be a
but
struggle.
they have a great scouting department and general manager there. So
Yes.
I'm all for, and owners all talk to each other. I'm sure he'll be picking other owners' brains, being like, I need to build this. Anyone you have that you're like willing to recommend, that kind of thing.
Right.
As much as owners are competing, they do that stuff all the time.
At least he won't be asking for videos of naked cheerleaders.
Yes, let's hope not.
I strongly doubt that he's a creep like that. He just doesn't
No.
strike me as the type.
No,
No,
and
he's-
the guys around
and
him.
And he's always been a very, very community-based guy. A year after he bought the Sixers, he opened up a community center for inside the city and did these charitable works. And he did the same thing in New Jersey when we got the Devils. And in fact, the Devils, I think he also opened up a youth program for hockey so they could teach the youth how to. It's just he's all about the community. So he'll do the same thing in DC.
Sure. If he did a hockey youth program in Philly, though, they would all just be goons. It would be an entire squad of goons.
By the way, Alex,
Oh.
did you say that the team is having some kind of pep rally this week?
Yeah. So that is the other story that came out today, or not story, but the team announced that on Friday at 1 o'clock at FedEx Field, they're going to have a pep rally in preparation for training camp and for the Harris Group to introduce themselves to the fans.
We all know what it really is. It's a goodbye Danny pep rally.
It's a little bit of a good
Absolutely.
fight.
But here's what I would ask the fans.
Right.
Burn him in effigy, fine. Do whatever you want, but let it go. After
Sure.
tomorrow, after Friday, let it go.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Celebrate
Take-
once and then move on.
Take that one step further. 106.7 The Fan, 98 or 980, whatever they call themselves now.
Yeah.
Every one of you guys, after Friday, that's enough. No more Dan
Right.
at all.
Just
I mean,
ghost them.
because even the junkies come on and go, well, if Sam Howell becomes a success as his franchise quarterback, is that a Dan Snyder decision? I'm like, you know what?
No.
Detach Dan Snyder. Go away, knock it off, and don't even mention Dan Snyder again.
Yeah, it's just no point in
No.
continuing to relive it. I mean, we all lived through it. It's about to be over. Celebrate once and then look to the future. With
Sam Howell was drafted in the 5th round. Dan Snyder was not in the, owner's box or not in the draft room at that point. He was in some weird hotel doing unspeakable things to himself.
He might have been in the draft. Who knows? But I don't even give Ron
everyone
Rivera
always
too
kind
much
of made
credit.
it clear that he left after the 2nd round.
I don't give Ron Rivera too much credit for a 5th round draft pick.
No.
Like it's a crapshoot at that point.
Of course.
Yeah, right.
I don't give Dan any credit for anything.
I guess my point is like at some point you gotta be positive.
Yeah.
When you survive the trauma, look to the future. You don't want to continue to live in the past. So I would say, because there's going to be that pep rally is. I'd love to see it. I'm in Texas, so I would love to see it, just to see, because I think it'll be wild. But I would hope to think it'll be over.
I don't know if it'll be wild because you're doing it at 1 o'clock on a Friday.
There's plenty of people who don't work like all of us do. Okay,
Yeah,
Right.
I
plenty of
know.
people will be able to take off.
Weird people who aren't workaholics. I don't understand you. Like,
People are on Twitter all day. Like, what are they doing?
yeah, yeah. Well, I
So
could be.
Especially a Friday, take an afternoon off. There'll be a
yeah.
billion
I'm
people
sure.
there.
I'm sure there will be people. I just could you imagine how much bigger it would be if they did it on Saturday?
True.
They would probably fill the lower bowl of that stadium at
Well,
least.
Alex, you told me you're going to tell your boss that you're going to take the
Yeah,
afternoon
right.
off.
That's a good plan for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good plan right now.
uh,
What's his
Uh,
name? I'll go talk to him for you.
no, 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 no.
nah, that I won't. I wouldn't suggest that one either.
Yeah, that sounds like a worse plan somehow.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Never mind.
Yeah. All right. So other things going on because although we could make fun of Dan Snyder and talk about this future with Harris, we're gonna be doing it. Like it's gonna be happening. From here on out, we're just gonna be talking about the future, baby. It's all
Yep.
the future is now again. That
Yes.
that's where we're at. And if you don't understand that reference, turn in your fan card. So, um, Dave, you brought up something interesting. This story that's been making the rounds on social media, and I think it started because, who was the running back? Was it Taylor?
Austin
Who first?
Eckler.
Austin Eckler was complaining very loudly about how running backs are underpaid, which
Hmm.
compared to other positions they are.
Sure, I agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's become quite the hullabaloo about this on social media and on NFL Network and all these places. What do we do? What do we do? There's nothing you can do. I think is the clear answer right now. But let's talk about it, Dave. You and I kind of gotten a little back and forth because you vague tweeted you're not talking about the elephant in the room.
Yes, I did.
And one, Alfred Haynesworth is not in the room. So what are you talking about?
Are you calling Albert
very,
Hainsworth an elephant?
I was.
very, very nice reference. I like that. But the point. The point I was getting to is it's a quarterback league. It's a quarterback driven league. That's the
Sure.
most important position in the draft. And, in the league, period, probably in all sports. You could debate that between that and a pitcher, whatever. That's fine. But and now in this day and age in the NFL, if you don't have at minimum a top 10 quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going very far in the playoffs. Teams, I think the percentage, and Steve, you can give me exact numbers on this one. I think it's quarterbacks amount for like 16%
Well, it
of an
depends on the
NFL cap
team.
usually.
Like Washington, it's microscopic right now.
I'm just talking about a franchise quarterback, a true franchise quarterback. That
Oh,
when you
it's
pay
gonna
that much.
be, a franchise quarterback's gonna be 30 million at least, which is
Right.
all by itself. What?
Like between 16 or 18%, right?
Yeah, well, not that much.
Between them and the other and the second string backup, so forth, it amounts to
Yeah.
almost around that, right?
Yeah.
So when you're investing into a position like that, and you have a franchise quarterback to invest into, that you're going to have until he's anywhere from 35 or potentially 35 to 40 years old, then it's like, well, where do we go from there? Well, we got to give him protection, especially at a blindside tackle. There's a snowball effect. So now it's like you want to get your left tackle secured. You want to make sure your center and your offensive line is good in front of him. Well, it's a passing league. So who is it that you want to have to pay? A receiver, a top 10, 15 receiver, or a top 10 running back? When running backs, you can cycle through every 3 to 5 years, and you can find a comparable running back to keep playing your system, and you do a running back by committee. Where receivers and that chemistry with the quarterback, that becomes very, very, well, right now anyway, with the way they're paying receivers, it's becoming the theme right now going forward. Overall, my whole point is that if you want to balance everything out, the elephant in the room is that you got to get these quarterback contracts under control, because they just keep going up more and more in every year. I'm not saying cut it like 50%, but you need to have a system in place, something like maybe even a base salary structure for each position. Use a calculation that's going to earn years of service, maybe games played, or however you want to calculate that base salary. and that's a guaranteed money you make, and then of course whatever guarantees you get onto that contract gets tacked onto that, and then you make the rest of your money in like incentives over,
Well, that's
reachable incentives. That's the thing.
all that sounds wonderful, but it's capitalism dictates
Yeah,
otherwise.
no, you're right. Absolutely, you're
But
right. Yeah.
I actually don't really totally agree with this. I mean, there may be some of it, that's kind of salary cap driven, but the bigger issue to me with the running backs is that a lot of most of these high end running backs fade away in
Yeah, short
three,
lifespan.
4 years. That
Yeah.
look at even like Ezekiel Elliott with Dallas.
Yeah.
Didn't get a big second contract. And that's just one. They're going through this with Saquon Barkley in New York right now. Derrick Henry is one of the few that survives multiple seasons.
Yeah.
You have to be almost a Hall of Fame level running back to survive at the same level of production through a second contract. And so what I think it's less that they don't have the money, because I think you're right. Yeah, they're spending a lot of money on quarterbacks. That you're right, but they could also find more money if they wanted to.
Well, sure.
It's more that these teams don't want to take the risk that the dude who they've been giving 200 to 300 carries a season is going to be able to do that through season 8, because almost none of them are. None of them are. That's the bigger problem, is that. And so what's the answer here? Well, maybe it's running back by committee, but in that case, you're not going to get a big salary. So I think it's really more like market conditions more than anything with the running backs.
Right.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely a market thing. I mean, these are natural market forces we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, look, running backs don't have the longest lifespan. How long did Emmitt Smith play? He played 13 years.
About
and
that,
he's the
yeah.
most
Very
productive
rare
running
in
back
the Hall of
history.
Fame.
Yeah.
13 years is not I mean, that's a very average pro football career.
No, it's not. It's much higher than the average pro career is like 3 years.
Well, I meant for like a top player, not like plenty of guys wash out in 2-3 years. I know that, and that's what brings it down. But I'm talking your guys who are considered all-time greats. They're all 10 plus years.
Yeah.
You don't have running backs go 15, 20 years very often.
No.
Maybe Frank Gore went that long. I don't even know if he did.
Frank Gore went on for a really long time, but Frank Gore's a Hall of Fame caliber player. Right. Emmitt Smith is a Hall of Fame caliber player. It's these guys they just can't do it. I'm looking up Frank Gore here.
16 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and when you look at a guy like Austin Eckler, I mean, he's a great receiving back. His career rushing yards per carry is like 3.6, 3.9 yards a carry.
Yeah, well, that's my point. Like, why would you sign?
It's like you're not even a complete running back.
Why would you sign up for that at a big contract value for 4 more years?
Exactly.
You can get 3.7 out of a free agent.
Right. Exactly. Right. And then we just talked about the offensive side of the ball. Your edge rushers are key components to a defense. They spend a lot of money on. If you have a top-tier defensive tackle like an Aaron Donald, like we just got them paying Allen and Payne, if you have that player, you're going to give him a lot of money. You're going to have somebody in the secondary, especially a corner, who's productive every year. You're going to give him a lot of money because they have longer careers. And like you said, Steve, and what I also alluded to, is that you just don't have the lifespan in a running back. And the only way you're going to make this work is some sort of a salary structure that's going to give a base guaranteed salary. But the only problem with that is you have to get everybody to agree to that. Well, and I'm sorry, you're not going to get everyone in that union hall right there going, hey, you know what? I'll tell you what, I'll sacrifice $10 million a year, or I'll do a structured cap just so this guy here could get paid more money. Right. That's not human nature. That's not going to happen. And
it's a lot more complicated. I mean, there's a collective bargaining agreement that establishes base salaries. The owners do not and will not go down the road of guarantees to any great extent. They're willing to guarantee a year or two, and that's it.
I'm not talking like astronomical, like guaranteed fully.
I know,
like
but they're not doing
year,
that, Dave. They're not doing that.
I get that, which is what I'm alluding to. That's not everything that can fix it's not going to fix it. And that was what I was saying.
I don't think it's anything to fix. I mean, to be honest, I don't think it's a problem. I'm sorry
Well,
for Austin Eckler and Jonathan
I'm
Taylor,
looking.
but the market dictates what the market
Well,
dictates.
I'm just looking at it in their perspective, in terms of, well, let's fix this. The only way it's going to fix it, you're not going to fix it. I agree with you on that, Steve. You're not going to get any
Here's the way to
budget
fix it.
movement on that.
I've got an option. Hit 4.5 yards per carry in year 7.
Yeah. Well, that's not easily done.
I
That
know,
is
but
true.
that's what
Yeah.
you need, because what you're paying for in a contract, in the NFL in particular, is you're paying for future performance.
Yes.
It's a prediction of performance, and I don't know why most teams would predict that a running back could continue to do what he does into the middle to later years in a career. So
Yeah,
why
right.
should they pay you big money? If anybody was going to get the big money, it would have been Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas. And it turns out they made the right choice, because he was not as
Well,
good
I
as
thought
Tony Pollard last year.
Right.
I thought he made it to his second contract in
It
Dallas.
wasn't nearly what he wanted, though.
No.
It was
No.
like 2 years or something.
Yeah,
It was-
and it wasn't huge money.
So
Oh, just more
a
of an
couple
extension,
things
basically. Yeah, that was it.
a couple thoughts I have. One, under the current CBA is not changing anytime soon, so like
No.
they're not getting anything done that way. I do think that if running backs want to be real about like how can they make it better for them, they need to change their approach altogether with their contracts within the confines of what they can do, which is maybe start looking at more incentive-based contracts for running performances, because that's allowed. You're still allowed to do incentive-based contracts, right, Steve? You can.
Yeah,
I
there's
know
all
Jim
kinds
said
of
they don't-
incentives.
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
every contract's got incentives in it.
Yeah, but usually they're minor things like workout bonuses. I'm talking performance bonuses again, which is something the NFL did a long time ago and has moved away from. But if I'm a running back and I really want to stay with the team, I'm telling them, hey, give me an extra $1 million if I get 10 touchdowns a season. Give me this if I'm, 1,000-yard running back, something like that,
Or if I
Just-
average that 4.7 yards a carry
Yeah.
for a
Spit-
year,
I'm just spitballing some
No, yeah.
ideas.
Yeah.
Like that's how they're gonna make their money in the current system. Or you got to switch positions, which is not easy to do. But look, this is the nature of this sport: is that in different periods in history, they favor different positions. The running back was the most important position in football from like 1940 to 1970 or something like that. It was, you could argue, a running back was probably more valuable to a team than a good quarterback.
Yeah.
Just because that's how the game was played. It's evolved. The fullback's gone. Linebackers are disappearing. We're basically playing spread offenses all the time now, and shotgun offenses all the time now. By the way,
Right.
someday quarterbacks might be irrelevant for all we know. They will keep.
I don't know how that could happen in a game of football.
If they change the rules again, who knows what happens? Because this game changes rules all the time, and that's the nature of part of the game.
And
I guess.
plus, when you have players that are starting to come around, like, I mean, you don't have many of them, but you're starting to see them come up in college in this mode of your Deebo Samuels, where you're a receiver that can effectively be a running back to many extents.
Right.
That's going to eat into what these running backs can do. And it's like, I'm not going to pay you top tier money for when we can do a committee with a receiver out there where we can get 2 running backs. Like for a while, you had Wilson and Mostert out in San Francisco for years, going back and forth, and they were winning with that combination. Why? Because they were able to keep their salaries down, and they were able to keep that offensive defensive line, that whole defensive unit intact. That's where they put all their investment, and they were winning. They were one of the best teams in the entire NFL. So you're not going to get this magical shift over to running backs. It's just not going to happen. And even what I said on what to lay out, that was just looking at their perspective on how to get there. But like you said, Steve, you're not going to get there. Owners aren't going to commit to that.
No, why would
so
they?
It's like, exactly.
And
But
I was a bit wrong. Elliott did. I was kind of remembering a little bit wrong. Elliott did initially get a big contract, but it got later. They converted a bunch of it, and they allowed him to be in a position to be cut when he wouldn't have. So
right.
they kind of backtracked a little bit. So I had it a bit wrong. But the point is the same, which is they had a contract that allowed them to get out of it. That's the
Right.
point to take away.
Right, and look, that happens to everybody though. Like, other than quarterback, every position kind of gets treated that way. You
Yeah,
know
but
that.
especially running backs.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, no question. Running backs are getting treated pretty rough now. I mean, kickers
Right.
Well,
still
look,
get treated rough.
kickers
Like
make a surprising amount of money actually.
they
But
well they do, but like they get cut mid-season all the time.
sure. But like, look at Washington as an example. Why on earth would they give Antonio Gibson?
A second deal, yeah,
Yeah,
wouldn't make sense.
no.
And I like Antonio Gibson.
Maybe they might keep him around, but they're not going to give him a big deal to do it.
No, it'd probably be like a couple year
Yeah, at
deal and
most.
incentive related too, probably.
Probably. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, it'll be like he'll get $6 million a year for more years, and that'll be it.
Because he's a free agent at the end of the season,
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
and like he's a guy who has been okay, but not great. I don't know
right.
why not that he's asked for it, but I mean he's not going to get a big contract, nor should they
By
get it.
the
They could
way,
draft somebody.
those are the guys who do stick around the league for a little bit longer. It seems like the okay but not great guys because they aren't going to ask an exorbitant
They're
amount
not
of
going to
money.
get beat up either.
Right.
Right.
And they're in rotations. They might
Yeah.
change teams a
I
couple
mean, I
times,
mean,
but
it's almost to a point to where if you come in and you're like an Austin Eckler, you sit there and you tell the team and say, listen, keep me as a running back by committee. We'll keep the salary moderate. I want to be here long term. Preserve me and my legs. Get a comparable back with me. And what we'll do is running back by committee throughout my career. I just need a little bit more incentives in terms of roster bonuses or performance bonus stuff like that, to where I can make more money.
Mhm.
Don't wear me out. Keep me in the passing game, and let me stay here my entire career, and give me a compliment back, and rotate the compliment back if you have to, and then let me get my fair share that way, while I'm being productive for you at the same time.
Well,
I, I I mean, the teams need to do what they need to do to collectively average about 4.5 yards a carry.
Right.
That ought to be the goal, and it's just generally not going to be one guy for more than a year or two at most.
right.
Yeah.
The and more thing we haven't really even brought into this, the evolution of how the running game is done. Uh, I don't think it's helped running backs. I think the zone blocking scheme is great because anybody can be a good running back, but I think that wears guys down faster because they get, a lot more leg tackles and stuff like that hurt them. That's just my theory. I don't know how much evidence there is of that, but it
Oh,
seems
and
like
also,
the guys' careers have gotten significantly shorter since the zone blocking scheme became the popular way to run.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
well, and
hard to know.
you also have the RPO where you're sitting there and the quarterback's
Sure.
holding off, and if the quarterback's in a position where, okay, the defender's there, I'm not going to get myself killed. I'll hand it off to him, and bam, the running back gets nailed, even though So
Sure.
that's because the running back isn't exactly coming from 5-7 yards back, getting the ball full head of steam and hitting that hole quick. In RPO, that's not the case. He's coming up from a couple yards back, coming up, he's slowing up,
Yeah.
unsure if he's going to get the ball or not, and then he's got to change gears again and he get back to top speed.
It's
And
also
he's
just, I
vulnerable
mean,
now.
where we started with this, the league has just become more of a passing league.
Yeah,
I think the
absolutely.
prominence of the running backs has gotten a lot less than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
no
You know,
question.
so the market value of the position is just less than it was, and you throw in all these other factors. I mean, I wouldn't sign them either for
Yeah.
big money.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, look. Now I do think, to bring it all back around, the Ecklers are the valuable running backs, the ones who are receiving backs. Like, as much as I love Smash Mouth football, in this league, you want a guy who can catch the ball.
Yeah,
So,
but I think what would be more important though, it may not be a running league, but you have to have somebody who can average more than 4 yards a carry.
oh, absolutely.
Otherwise,
I
there's no
understand.
point to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the trick.
Yeah. Yeah. It's rare to find a guy who can do both.
Yeah, but if I had to pick one, I'd pick one that can average more than 4 yards a carry because you can always find more receivers.
Yeah.
I guess so.
That's just
that's
me.
a
That's what I
possible.
would do.
Yeah. Yeah. I like a good. I fell in love with the Marshall Falks of the world. Like that. The
But you
Brian
still have
Westbrook.
to be able to
Actually,
run the ball at
the
times.
the perfect back for today's game would be a LaDainian Tomlinson, guy
Oh,
who can
absolutely.
average 4.7 yards a carry and catch 100 balls every year.
That's
'Cause
why he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
exactly. You
Yeah.
don't get many of them to spend. I mean, unless you had Barry Sanders. You had Barry Sanders, you don't have to worry about the receiving back because no one could touch him anyway.
Yeah. Well,
So,
also, an all-time great. So
Yeah, I
that's
mean, maybe
yes.
the greatest, most talented running back ever.
well, yeah, there's a
Down
reason
for
why
down. Yeah.
there's a reason why I named both of those two guys. They're
Yeah,
two of my
exactly.
all-time favorite running backs.
Yeah. That's a good duo right there.
Yeah.
All right. We already are on an hour. We said we wouldn't be able to do it, and we did because we forgot what position group we're talking about this week, guys.
Oh, I kind of messed this up because
Yeah.
I published the tackle. We were going to do tackles. I
Right.
published this early
Weeks
for
ago,
some
yeah.
couple weeks ago for some weird reason, and we are convinced that we have already done the tackle position group breakdown. In case we haven't, the nutshell of it is that Leno and Wiley are definitely going to be the starters, beyond a shadow
Right.
of a doubt. The backup is going to be Cornelius Lucas. Braden Daniels is going to be on the roster because he's a 5th-round draft pick, or not a 5th-round draft pick. What?
Sixth. We'll see. He was drafted somewhere. Let's
Yeah,
just
he
say.
was the draft pick, so he's going to be there. And Trent Scott is making a lot of money, so that's probably your group in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Right.
So last thing that I brought up, and we don't really care about Madden ratings, but I found it interesting that Madden this year is rating Jonathan Allen as the second best defensive tackle in the league, and that Terry McLaurin they had in the top 10 of wide receivers. So the question to both of you is, do you think that is a fair place to put either of them? Let's just say Allen top 5 defensive tackle.
And where was McLaurin, top 10?
Yeah,
Top
he
10.
was 8 out of 10.
I couldn't care less about Madden ratings whatsoever, and that's it
Sure,
to me.
sure.
But
I'm
your
using
larger
different context
question
for a
is,
larger thing.
yeah, are they in those respective groups in the league? I think from a talent perspective, I'd probably put Allen in the top 10,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd probably put McLaurin top 15, maybe. That's
Sure.
probably where I would go because I have seen Terry McLaurin get beat many
Mm-hmm.
times, like consistently in games, and I've seen Jonathan Allen go stretches where he's doesn't have a huge impact on the game. And I'm not knocking him necessarily, but if you want to evaluate him against the best,
Right.
like Aaron Donald, you always know where he is, and there are times when you don't have that with Jonathan Allen.
Right.
And McLaurin, the top receivers are not going to get consistently beat. Like Darius Slay beats him a lot consistently.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple others, so I would probably go top 10 and top 15, but that's just my off the top of my head.
What about you, Dave?
I
Second and 8th in the league.
I would definitely keep Allen in the top 10. And I think there's an argument you can have for McLaurin to be top 10. But just like Steve said, I mean, there's an argument to keep him just outside. I think he's like right there on that bubble. And I don't think he could go either way on either side. All I know is I don't think that they're that far off on where they should be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe Allen could be closer back to the 5 end of the top 5 as opposed to number 2 in the league. And McLaurin probably, if you're going to say he's outside the top 10, he's probably closer to 12, 13, something like that. But then again, I think you're just kind of splitting hairs there with the kind of deciding where you want to put them. All you want to know is they're great team leaders, they're productive players, or guys that you're going to have show up almost every Sunday. Maybe not dominate every Sunday, but they're definitely going to make some level of an impact every Sunday. So, and everyone said as soon as McLaurin gets that consistent quarterback, he's going to flourish and be that top guy. But the thing is, if he's a top guy and he's a consistently that top guy, then he should be able to do it even with a mediocre quarterback every single week. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins did it last couple of years with mediocre play with Kyler Murray. That
Sure.
won't be a popular thing to say from people. It's like, oh, Kyler Murray, he hasn't been a great consistent passer, or a consistently great passer, I should say.
No.
Yet DeAndre Hopkins is still what? 2? 1, 2, 3?
He's always dangerous no matter who's out there.
No
And
matter
that's
what.
not,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just have seen Terry get beat or get, covered well too many times.
Well,
Right.
so
Call him
what?
top 5.
Here's what I would say. I think Allen being in the top 5 is probably fair. I don't know if he's second or, because we don't know who's gonna fall, who's gonna, guys are getting older. It happens. Like Aaron Donald at some point is not going to be an elite defensive tackle. Just age will catch up to him, which I think is what Madden's kind of envisioning in their game. But McLaurin, the trickier part is the league is just so much deeper at wide receiver now than it's ever been. There are probably more guys who could be number ones in the league now than any point in the league's history. And that's because of how the rules are shaped now, and you can't really play defense and all that stuff. And yes, McLaurin gets beat because he's probably not the fastest guy. His talents as a receiver make it so you can beat him. He's not uncoverable. He's just a great route runner, and he plays. I think he plays every down just as hard from start to end, so that's what helps him. But yeah, you can beat him. I don't know if I'd say he's top 10 or not. Just because
I think he's kind of on the, just like Dave said, he's kind of just on the outside looking in of that. I think I pick a number, but somewhere right outside the top 10, I think is where he should be.
Like I said, I think there's probably 35 guys now who could be 1,000-yard receivers in the NFL. Like that's just how deep the league is at receiver.
Could be.
And and it's not a knock against McLaurin either.
No.
I mean, people have to understand that, like you said, Alex, the receivers out there are just insane. It's A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill. You go down the list. Even DeAndre Hopkins, still keeping that top 10 at minimum. But people
there's a lot more. Justin Jefferson. There's a lot. Yeah,
it's insane on the receivers that are out there. It's like because there's no way you're going to tell me you would take McLaurin over Justin Jefferson.
No.
Right,
you're not taking McLaurin over Devontae Adams. You're not doing that. I'm sorry. I love McLaurin. I love the fact he is in Washington. I love the fact that he's our team leader. I love everything about McLaurin. But let's be realistic on what he is right now. Now, granted, you could sit there and say, well, he played with a quarterback who couldn't get the ball down deep accurately in Heineke. That's fair. You could say that. He's had other quarterbacks that just couldn't get the ball in his area consistently at all.
You're being honest, and these other people are saying that are being homers. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sure. Look, there's a lot of homerism that gets involved in all of this.
Yeah, and that's not wrong. Root for who you want to root for, but we're just trying to be honest about it. That's all.
Yeah, I don't know where he falls in just because. And I just checked. 22 guys had 1,000 yards last year. My point was more about who's capable.
And also, I have to say that fantasy rankings, I hate them, but it's also geared towards who's going to produce the most fantasy points, which isn't totally the same as who's the best.
Now, granted, the one thing that McLaurin does do, he's one of the better receivers at it in the league, is getting those tough 50-50 balls. He plays much bigger than what his height is. I think he was ranked number 2 last year on 50-50 balls and actually completion of them, coming down with them. I forget what the number was exactly, but he's definitely a competitive receiver, and he comes down with almost everything.
Yeah.
And that's great, especially in the red zone. That's a great stat to have, or ability to have, rather.
And he's made some very acrobatic catches that go overlooked because the team's terrible.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. So I think we're all in agreement kind of where these guys are. All right. Do we have anything else we want to talk about? Anything?
No, just happy VD Day, everybody.
Yeah, happy
Victory
VD Day.
Victory over Dan Day.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I look forward to next week where I've written a huge article about special teams. We're talking special teams all next week.
It's going to take me all week to edit it.
Well, I heard you're going to do an audio book style version for people to read it, not for people to listen to at night for insomnia.
Well, I'll turn up my bass. It's gonna be a lot more like this.
In all seriousness, nobody loves special teams more than Alex. I have not read this yet,
No, that's
and
true.
I'm joking about. I mean, I will have to edit a lot, but I'm joking about that. But in all seriousness, if you want to read something where a dude is going to have like a super more of a nerdy deep dive than anybody else in special teams, it's going to be Alex. So read it when it comes
You
Let's
out.
might-
start with Gunners, guys. That's how good That's how special team it gets.
But you might want to have Tressway proofread it first to make sure that everything Alex says is appropriate to say.
Hey, we've had Tressway on this show. We need to call him. He never sent us a copy of his board game, is what I remember.
No, he did. I got it.
Oh, you did?
I think so. It's in my basement.
And it's probably autographed, right?
No, it's not. It was shrink
With
wrap.
the little heart shape around it.
Because we had him on in part to talk about the game, but none of us had ever seen it. And we tried to get
He
it.
didn't send it to us though. I bought it. I didn't.
You
I don't
did?
think- yeah,
I didn't ask him to send it for free.
yeah. I bought it just to support him in his endeavors because a millionaire punter needs our support.
Yeah, yes,
Hey,
it does.
everybody has to have their side gigs. Ours is this one. His is a game.
Yep. Yeah. Hey, I don't knock it. It's a very healthy side gig.
He was a decent guy. I enjoyed
He's
talking to him.
Yeah, nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
maybe
guys.
one day we'll get a guest on here again.
Well, see, you got to motivate me to round him up, Dave. I mean, that was back when I was a fan of the team, and I was like spending a bunch of time trying to find these guys, and I haven't.
Yeah,
been
that's when
motivated to
we
do that.
had a lot of passion. We also, we were doing goofy things back then. It was
Yeah, I also had a lot more time. I don't have a ton of time to do that anymore either.
Yeah.
so.
Right.
All right,
But
guys.
we're hurting. I know you want guests because I know I get it, but someday I will be motivated.
Someday.
Well, maybe. Well,
I also
maybe
ran
tomorrow.
out of Redskins legends that I knew enough to get a hold of.
That was a big part of it.
Yeah,
Except for Jacoby, we kind of fell into back in the day.
but Jacoby, I hit him up on Twitter, I
Yeah.
think. But like Ricky Sanders, I know him.
Right.
Some of these other guys we stumbled into, but we've kind of run the gamut of like legends that we can stumble into.
Another thing, and people don't know this, trying to find guys on Twitter and getting them to talk to you was a lot easier back then.
Yes,
Yeah.
Because
was.
Twitter wasn't the cesspool yet.
it's a hellscape now.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
by the way, for every guest we had on, there were 3 of them that wouldn't do it.
That's
Even
true.
back then,
Right.
Can I knock one of them or no? Should I keep my
Are you
mouth
talking about the one that really irritated me?
I don't remember which one really irritated you.
Put
I
it in the
remember-
chat real fast, and I'll tell you.
Well, was the one who irritated you just the cheerleader? I won't say a name.
No, I didn't. That didn't irritate me because I got it. I mean, we had a cheerleader lined up back when the cheerleader scandal came up, and she backed out at the very last minute. But I didn't falter for that.
Yeah.
She I mean, it was a difficult thing for her, and she decided she didn't want to talk.
Yeah.
That other one,
and
Alex.
by the way,
one-
That's like 12 scandals ago now. That's the funniest thing.
I know it's like a long forgotten scandal.
Yeah.
The one Alex put in the chat, we at one point had Deshaun Jackson's mom lined up. She stood us up.
Yeah. That annoyed me.
But that was also back when we didn't deserve to have any guests on. That was way, way in the beginning, though.
Yeah. But
No, the one
still,
that irritated me was the defensive lineman who got arrested for smacking the person with the belt on the beach.
Oh, Junior Gillette.
Junior Gillette irritated me tremendously.
yeah,
We had him lined up, and he stood us up, and he really irritated me.
You didn't want him on that show anyway. That guy is just. Well,
He's
I'll
a
say-
total loose cannon. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he is absolutely.
We would actually have to censor half of what he would probably say.
We probably
Right.
would have. Yeah. So screw him. He really irritated me.
And what's crazy too is that Junior Gillette, he actually followed me back and a handful of other fans because we initially supported a lot of what was going on with him in the beginning, and then
Sure.
as he
I
started
did.
kind of getting in, and when he started kind of getting real, kind of crazy upstairs with everything and the thought process, people like me would give him an honest critique of what he's saying. Is like, well, remember this, and next thing you know, block or whatever.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean
yeah.
he's
Hey,
not
come
playing
on,
the full
man.
deck. That guy's
No,
got
not at all.
scruples.
No.
All right.
He's into like the whole sovereign citizen thing, I think. So like
Yeah.
All kinds of God knows what's going through that dude's head.
All right, guys, that should wrap us up on this week's show as we talk about crazy people. So long, Dan Snyder.
Out of here, boy.
Yeah.